And I'd be grateful if you could put your mobiles on silent, please, and also introduce yourselves. We'll start with German television at the back.
My name is Kai Niklasch. I'm from German Television ZDF. Could you give us some idea how the payment for the security forces in Afghanistan are related to the average income in Afghanistan? So how much do they get, so that we have an idea how much that is? And for how many years is that guaranteed? What does the international community plan? Is it paid for the next 5 or 10 years, or what are the plans?
What I would tell you is that we've done is we've been able to, with the international community, to bring their pay to what we call a living wage. In November of 2009, a policeman, a basic police patrolman, made 1/2 the pay of an Army private. So when people would say to me, well, they're illiterate, they're not well trained, they're corrupt, my answer almost was, well, yeah, we've sort of set those conditions as an international community that almost lead them to that path. Today, they do make a living wage, Army and police. It's about, and I could get my team to pull up the exact pay chart, which we'll be glad to provide to you, but it's about $170 US dollars, if you don't mind me using that, as a starting monthly wage. And then, based on your time in service, your pay can go up. Every 3 years, you get a pay increment. And then with promotions, you get a pay increment. If you're serving in a hazardous duty area, an area where there's a lot of ongoing conflict in Afghanistan, like down in the Kandahar, Helmand area, or out in the east, you then also draw an additional monthly stipend for being in an intensified combat area. Both police and Army draw that. And then if you're part of a national expeditionary force, you draw an additional incentive pay for that. So there's incentives that are added on to this base pay that they make in the force. And then as we bring on more specialty skills, like pilots, explosive ordnance disposal people, they'll receive some sort of specialty pay. Again, each of these to recognize and to retain these special skill sets that they've received in their force. So they start about $170 US dollars a month, and then have their specialty pays and enhancements, longevity pay, and promotions on top of that. So they've actually got a fairly good living wage now that they make. The international community that pays for their police salaries is done through LAFTA. YANAMA handles that. We work very closely with them. Really, the whole international community does. We have monthly meetings, and we do find that today about 40% of the LAFTA pay is provided by the country of Japan. They're a very large contributor to that effort in helping pay for the police salaries inside of Afghanistan. But there has been no inclination by any of the nations that they have any intention other than to continue helping with that pay. There are requirements for the government of Afghanistan to add more over time to pay for it themselves. And there's percentages that YANAMA has set that the international community all concurs with, so that there's this expectation that they'll assume more as they have the gross domestic product, the ability to pay for more themselves, so they don't become dependent forever on the international community. Within the Army, the pay is provided right now 100% by the United States. They pay for all the Army pay. And right now, the budget that we have projected this year, next year, and for the next several years, there's more than sufficient funding in there to continue with the pay for that too.
James?
Yes, Brooks Signer, Jane's Defense Weekly. I have two related questions, both about the Air Force. Afghanistan is a very big mountainous country and poor roads, which demands air surveillance, ISTAR, and air support if needed against the Taliban once transition has taken place. I see here you're going to generate forces of 8,000 by November 2012. My question, where does training stand on the Afghan Air Force? That's a training of an order of magnitude altogether different than for foot soldiers. What's the timing on that? And secondly, to what extent does the International Trust Fund or the U.S. Trust Fund fully meet the needs in terms of equipment for the Air Force for the end of 2004 when transition will be complete? Thank you.
Now, thanks. When the build of the Air Force is complete, there will be about an 8,000-person Air Force with about 145 airframes, both rotary wing and fixed wing. The key thing I would tell you right now is we have all the funding that we need to procure all those airframes, so that's not an issue. In fact, most of the airframes, probably the next 50 have already, contracts have already been let, and over the next 2 years, those airframes will be delivered. So there is adequate funding currently being provided by the United States to procure the remainder of the airframes. As far as the timing of that goes, it does take until 2016 till the last of the airframes are delivered. And really the last ones coming in are going to be these close air support type aircraft. That contract's still to be let, funding available, that we would hope by next month it's let. We're going to be adding on to a contract that the United States Air Force is buying of aircraft for the United States Air Force. So we're going to leverage the buy of the United States Air Force to procure these 20 airframes for Afghanistan. They'll be propeller-driven, very sophisticated suites that give them the ability to do air-to-air and air-to-ground, both surveillance and interdiction, and obviously have the ability to drop bombs and everything else too, in close air support role missions. But those 20 aircraft will be the last to come online by 2016. We are continuing to procure more additional rotary wing helicopters. We just let the contract for 21 more Mi-17, what they call version 5, the advanced avionics suite cockpit with a little powerful more engine on it too, to operate in that part of the world. So we are also just now starting to begin, the contract's already been let, purchase has been made of what we call the 208 aircraft. It's one in which you can put a very sophisticated infrared surveillance radar suite inside of it, or make it an 8-person PAX aircraft, 8-person personnel aircraft to move people around too. We look real closely at all these things because if you want to operate an example, an Mi-17 helicopter, if you want to fly it from Kabul to Kandahar and back, total cost will be about $30,000 US dollars by the time you pay for fuel, maintenance, et cetera. If you want to take a 208 fixed wing airplane and move the same number of people, you take 2 airplanes, you can do it for about $6,000. So about 1/5 of the cost. And so we're spending a lot of time now with our Afghan counterparts talking to them about air programming and costing of things, so in the longer term they understand there are more economical and efficient ways to do certain movement of personnel and equipment than necessarily by rotary wing, which is very important for certain areas but doesn't necessarily need to be the main way in which to move equipment. So as we bring these more capabilities online, we'll continue helping them understand those kind of things. The training's ongoing. We have today 120 pilots in the pipeline. There's about 70 that are down in the United Arab Emirates, where we have a contract ongoing down there with the UAE, the Emirates, where they're training pilots, Afghan pilots for us. And then we have about another 50 that are inside the United States, where we've got a contract where they're training pilots there for us.
Since when?
Oh, yeah. No, they've been down there for over a year now. I visited them there about probably a year ago when we first started sending them down there. We expect them back in about a year. You're right, it's about a 2-year process by the time you go through all the English language certification and everything else that's required to become a pilot. But that'll be about 120 brand new second lieutenants, extremely well trained and versed in how to be pilots that'll be coming back in. This December, we're going to open up and start our first indigenous pilot training program inside of Afghanistan at Shindan Air Base. We just procured 6 flight trainers that are now have arrived and are down in Shindan. We just had our first 6 T-182. It's a small fixed-wing, single-prop airplane trainer that just arrived at Shindan. They just flew in from the United States, self-deployed all the way over. Those first 6 just arrived, and we're finishing the construction of a couple more facilities, and our first pilot training will start inside of Afghanistan this December and just continue to grow and enlarge as we bring on more capacity down there so that we don't have to do any more training outside of Afghanistan in the future years ahead. Again, giving them that indigenous capacity and capability. Initially, we'll do it with a lot of contractors and NATO trainers, and then over time, we'll transition it to Afghans being the trainers of their own pilots.
Financial Times.
Yes, thank you, General Caldwell. Peter Spiegel from the Financial Times. Can I ask you to address the recent UN report on abuses by, I think, the civilian agencies, the intelligence and police in Afghanistan? Have you dealt with the UN on that, liaised with them at all, and do you have any reaction to that? Also, there seems to be some discussion reports about desertion rates going back up again after a pretty good trend line of late. Can you address that as well, if that's accurate? And is that any sign that, what does that tell us, I guess is the question. Thanks.
Sure. I guess the first thing I would say on the allegations of mistreatment in the report that just came out, although I have not read it in its entirety, I'm very much aware of it. And what I can tell you from International Security Force Assistance Mission from General Allen on down is something we all take very seriously. Our Afghan counterparts do too. We have spent a considerable amount of time in the training base incorporating more human rights training and those type of skill sets into our training base so that as the new police and Army go through the training process, that is inculcated into them about treating all detainees with respect and dignity. These allegations that were made of mistreatment in that report, General Allen last month, the commander of ISAF, was made aware of this, and he did issue a statement, and I'll refer to a couple notes here I have on this just to make sure I have the data accurate. But in early September, he did issue a order that stopped the transfer of all detainees to the 16 installations that were identified in the ANAMA report. So that was done early last month, that he stopped the transfer of all detainees from ISAF forces, NATO forces, to those 16 facilities where there has been alleged mistreatment. He also gave an order with clear guidelines to start the implementation of a long-term detention certification and monitoring framework program before he will allow the resumption of any detainees being sent to those 16 facilities. He's got a 6-phase plan that he put in place. We've all been briefed on it in country. We're all out executing and implementing this already. Both us, the NATO forces, with our Afghan partners. There has been an ongoing joint ISAF and both NDS and ANP police joint inspections that have been ongoing of these facilities where there was alleged mistreatment of detainees that occur. He's also started remediation training of facilities leadership where we're helping support the Afghans with that. We're not doing it ourselves. We're in support of them. Everything from helping write programs of instruction to working with the international community and establishing what kind of things should be in this remediation training of leadership, interrogators, and detention guards on both human rights and detainee treatment. That's been ongoing. That has started. He is going to require a formal certification by the ISAF Provost Marshal. That's their senior law enforcement official within ISAF. For each location where these allegations were made to have occurred before he allow, again, any detainees to be transferred again to those locations. We're also working very closely with our Afghan counterparts on this process. we literally have an ongoing dialogue almost on a daily basis. I can tell you from those of us who work within the Ministry of Interior, it's a routine item that we do talk with the minister about now. He's got inspection teams out himself, and then of course there's the joint inspection teams that are out also going through right now, looking at this too. The biggest thing that I'll tell you that the ISAF we want to see happen here is a lot more transparency and open communications in the detention of detainees by the Afghan security forces, whether they be the National Directorate of Security or a police element inside of Afghanistan, so that with transparency and accountability, you greatly minimize the prospect of any kind of mistreatment occurring of a detainee. So hopefully that gives you some background. We were fortunate, to be given an advance copy by UNAMA last month so that we could immediately begin to take immediate steps, both us, ISAF, the International Security Assistance Force, and our Afghan counterparts into addressing these alleged situations, please.
Follow on the training aspect of this. You said in your opening statement that you have recently implemented human rights training and similar things. I think within the last year you said. Have you done any internal looking of whether there were shortfalls in the training process in terms of human rights, rule of law, that kind of thing? Is that a failure at all on the training mission, you think?
Now, what I tell you is we had it in the training base in the 6-week program. There was about 14 hours that were embedded into the 6 weeks of training. But as the international, and again, we started, like 9-10 months ago with the international community talking about expanding to an 8-week program. And in doing that, we all sat down and collectively agreed upon many, many months ago, what additional skills do we want to further enhance the police force with that's somewhat a predominant today counterinsurgency force almost, having operated in that environment to enable it to move to more what we call blue police skills, where they become more of a civil police force. And what are those things? And one that we all agreed was additional human rights training would be something that would be very important that we'd want to add in. And so we went from 14 hours to 32 hours during the 8 weeks of training. So again, we didn't just double it, we added even more than that. Recognize not this, there is a shortfall, but it's something that we all collectively agreed, the international community, not just NATO training mission, that we want to see much greater emphasis placed on as we've watched and observed the operations of various security forces inside of Afghanistan. As far as the second part of your question about attrition, if I could, here's what I would tell you. First of all, there's absolutely no challenge in meeting the current growth objectives. The Afghans officially yesterday met their growth objectives for this year by exceeding 305,000, 305.6 to be exact. They have now exceeded that. So even with any levels of attrition that are out there today, there's no shortage or inability to continue growing this force. That's the first thing. The second thing is on retention. We've got about somewhere between 60 to 70% of those who eligible, who've served their 3 years that could leave the force, are making the decision to continuing to serve. They're signing up for another stint within the Army and the police. So those serving are making the decision to continuing to serve. Where we do find is, we took what was an Army of about 97,000, we've almost doubled it in 2 years. We took what they had taken about 8 years to grow, and we doubled that in 2 years. And any time you take and have that kind of rapid expansion, you're going to have some growing challenges associated with it. Not unexpected in the least. You take any large corporation in the world and tell it to double itself overnight in 2 years. First of all, it'll be challenged to find the human capital. It's going to be challenged to find leaders. It's going to be challenged to find the right quality of type of people. The one thing we have been very adamant about is we are not going to sacrifice quality for quantity as we continue growing this force. And so what we have seen is that the attrition challenge out there that the Afghans have is about on par, maybe slightly up recently, that they've had over the last 2 years. It's not been basically unchanged. But until we get this force up to about 352,000, get the requisite leaders out there that are necessary, we're going to probably stay and still experience generally about what we see today. Because the thing we have done, we've got joint boards that sit down, us and the Afghans, and look at this issue. On a monthly basis, we do it. We found recently what they call a Kandak, a battalion of about 800 people in Kabul, part of the 111th Division, that has almost negligible attrition. I mean, almost none. And so we also went in there to dig into and ask ourselves why this Kandak, unlike many of the others, almost has none, when most armies in the world experience anywhere about a 15 to 8% attrition in their own armies. We do in the American Army. It's not an unusual, that's about a normal amount. So we went in and really researched it, and what we found it really boiled down to leadership. You know, the Kandak commander, the battalion commander, has put a real focus on taking care of soldiers in his battalion. He has set up a standardized leave schedule. Now, part of the problem we had 2 years ago was none of these young men could read it all. Today, about half of them have the level of basic reading level literacy. They can read a chart now and understand when they're supposed to be going on leave and when it's supposed to rotate to them in their next cycle. So they have an expectation and ensure that they get their authorized leave time that's authorized to them instead of feeling they have to just take it on their own. He also watches what they get paid. He actually goes around and talks to his soldiers to make sure they got their full pay that they're supposed to get that month, that somewhere along the line some of it didn't disappear. He looks very closely at their food and the quality of the food. I've learned more about quality of rice and meat and everything else over these 2 years I would never have thought of, but again, it's another area that if you're not careful, corruption can creep into, and so you have to monitor that and watch it very carefully, the quality of rice you buy and the quality of the meat and everything else. And then he looks at their living conditions, and he makes sure that they're adequate. Again, they don't have to be, you know, anything extraordinary, they just need to be adequate. And doing those four things, there's almost negligible attrition. I mean, it's below what would be normally expected. We found another unit down in Kandahar, the same thing. And it's a unit that's in constant combat too. So where we have found pockets of leaders that are doing an exceptional job, that understand about the need to serve others, to be a servant of your men and some women out there, that really does help rectify a lot of this. And so therefore, it just validated to us that our focus since day one on the importance of leadership is really something that we've put a lot of attention on and will continue to focus on in this mission.
German President.
Hi, I think I remember reading a story a couple of months ago that some states in Afghanistan were having trouble meeting their recruiting targets, even though the overall targets may be met because of intimidation by the Taliban. How much of a problem is that?
Well, I guess really I assume what you're asking about is Southern Pashtuns maybe. And last month, the month of September, was the highest number of Southern Pashtuns that we've recruited in the last 2 years. There's been an intense effort by the senior leadership of the Ministry of Defense to recruit Southern Pashtuns. They started it last fall, about a year ago now, and they've actually placed people down in the southern provinces to help reach out and interface with the local community, the governors, the tribal leaders, to sit in on shores, to encourage the young men down there to serve the country of Afghanistan. We had set a goal a year ago that we'd eventually want to get to 10% of the recruits coming in each month were Southern Pashtuns. We set a initial modest goal of 4% collectively between us. They've been meeting that now for the last 3-4 months. In fact, these last 2 months, it was exceptionally high, with this past month being over 10%. It's the first time we've ever been able to attain that. It's a singular data point. We will want to see a trend continue like that. That'd be ideal, because that means that it's at the level that will be representative of the people and the ethnicity being Southern Pashtuns of Afghanistan, if that can be maintained as a trend. But it's a singular point, but we're very encouraged because it hasn't happened in 2 years. but did this past month. And we know over the last 4 months, there's been a real steady incline of Southern Pashtuns joining the force, the army that is, which we hadn't seen before either. And so we're very encouraged by what we're starting to see. We just want to see that now continue as we move forth.
AP?
Just one question for you, Anna. Do you have any comment on the verdict in Ukraine for Yulia Tymoshenko? And then, General, in view of your family background, what makes you so optimistic about this training effort in comparison with, the much bigger training effort in Vietnam, which in the end, and much longer, which in the end, didn't end very well? Your own father was there, I think, in this role. So can you compare these two for me?
Sure, do you want me to let Anna go first? That was great, I hadn't realized that. That was, no, please, go right ahead.
On the verdict against the former Prime Minister Yulia Tymoshenko in Ukraine, this is a disappointing decision. As President Yanukovych has stated, though this is not the end of the process, so we hope that a solution can be found on the basis of the rule of law. Clearly, the rule of law, respect for human rights and democracy are basic, fundamental values for NATO, and they underline the relationship between NATO and Ukraine. And you can expect that allies will be looking very closely at this verdict and will take it into account when they start their assessment of Ukraine's national annual program towards the end of this month. So they will be looking at the state of reforms in Ukraine, including at justice reforms. General.
If I look back at, you asked the question, my father, he served both in obviously Korea and Vietnam. And what I would tell you is we look back at the Korean experience, that country today, a very prosperous, country that's moving forward and very prominent in the world. And I think one of the things you see there, that there is a long-term international commitment to remain engaged with and continue to help the South Koreans after that conflict there was terminated as they move forward. We didn't see the same in Vietnam. In fact, what we saw was the international community basically turned it over to them to handle the situation themselves. There's been a lot of talk about here in Afghanistan what will be the long-term international commitment beyond the period where they take the lead for security, which is December of 2014. And what I would say is I'm encouraged when I start hearing nations like the United Kingdom who said they're going to remain engaged in leader development inside of Afghanistan until 2023, or when I hear the Australians say they're going to remain engaged in the development of leaders in Afghanistan until 2020 at least. I know as an American officer that my country is in a dialogue with the Afghan leadership about how long American presence may reside here in this country and to what level. But I think what we will find, again, I'm speaking as an American officer for a minute, that the United States has an intent and in the ongoing dialogue plans to remain engaged to some level in Afghanistan well beyond 2014 too. My boss, my NATO boss here, General Allen inside of Afghanistan, has said, we're going to be here, and I think his exact words, for a long time, is what he says. And so I'm much more encouraged about the possibilities of what can happen here in Afghanistan by the decision in the international community to remain engaged well beyond December of 2014. Not only will they need some monetary assistance, but they're going to need also military assistance. They're still going to need some trainers. If you were to ask me a number, I would say that by December of 2014, Our training mission, which today has 5,100 personnel, military and civilian police, could easily be cut in half as we continue to assist and help in further development beyond that period. And then, of course, they're going to need other things, like they're still going to need some air support. They're still going to need some intelligence support. They're still going to need some sort of counterterrorism strike force that's available in the country to go after selected targets in concert with the Afghans. So those kind of skill sets will still need to be resident beyond December 2014 to assist the Afghans. So if the international community does do as they're talking about, I see a much different outcome occurring here inside of Afghanistan with their security force in the future years ahead.
We've got at least 2 more questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
We'll go over there, Belgian news.
Little mistake. Hans de Bruin, Netherlands Press Association. General, coming back to the issue of the number of recruits that you called phenomenal in your introduction. Last night, the Dutch Chief of Defense Staff, General van announced that the part of the Dutch police trainers in Kunduz will be withdrawn because of a lack of recruits. What's your take on that?
I did not hear that statement last night, so it's great to come here and get brought up to the current events of today. We've had tremendous dialogue and discussion with the Dutch leadership, with the ambassador there inside of Afghanistan. And, you know, obviously there's caveats that the Dutch government has placed on where and what type of police they're willing to train inside of Afghanistan. And I think what's occurred, again, from hearing what you just said, is that their intent was to train police that would operate inside of Kunduz in that area, and we've probably reached the level of what we call their authorized level of the Tashkil, their authorized level of police in that area, have now probably been trained. And so the real question was whether they'd be willing to train police that would serve in other parts of Afghanistan. But again, it's a political decision that the Dutch government made to train police that would just operate inside of Kunduz, I guess. And so, you know, we welcome all international contributions of police trainers. It really helps to have professional police involved in that effort versus, you know, doing military personnel or contract personnel to be leading that. They've made a real contribution, the Dutch police have that have been there. So I'll go back and look at exactly what was said and what that impact will be, but I just say up to this point I've been very appreciative of what the Dutch government has done, and that for the trainers that we have had from the Dutch government working inside of Afghanistan.
You didn't hear anything about the lack of recruits in that area? Because that's the point he made, there are not enough recruits to train, so...
Yeah, I'll have to go back and look at it. That would actually be very surprising to me because we've not had a challenge with recruits being willing to serve both in the police and in the Army. You know, like I said, we have so many every month now that we're able actually to do a very deliberate screening process with our Afghan counterparts and turn away many. Some we determine to be underage, even though they have papers that say they are of age. Some for medical reasons, some because the biometric data shows something that is irregular, and therefore we're not going to take the risk of allowing them into the security force. So we just politely tell them that there's not a need for their service.
Suddenly there's lots more hands going up, and I will refrain from introducing anybody. But just behind our colleague from ANP.
Yes, you are training a huge force, policemen, soldiers. Do you think that this force will be faithful to the government? What is your personal opinion on that after 2 years of training?
You know, when I opened up, I said there were reasons to be skeptical about this mission in 2009. And today I would tell you I feel very differently. I look at the events of September 13. I guess is the best example. I can give you a very recent example. You know, it's the day that a lot of the media said, you know, Kabul is under siege. Yet what I saw was a very different story, being on the ground in Kabul, moving around the city that day. What I saw was 3 policemen in 3 different instances that gave their lives to protect and serve the people of Afghanistan. I saw a young police patrolman that was on duty in front of his police station, and he spotted a suspicious man nearby. When he approached him, the man got up to flee. He saw a suicide vest, and John Ali was the police officer's name, took after this man and knocked him down as he was moving towards a crowd of students coming out of a high school that was adjacent to the police station. And in knocking him down, as he went down, the suicide bomber detonated his suicide vest and instantly killed, obviously, himself and John Ali. John Ali left a family of 4 and a wife that lived there in Kabul. There was another incident over the ANCOP police headquarters, the 1st Brigade headquarters, where again another police officer, and seeing a suspicious person approaches him, identifies it as another suicide bomber, and immediately does a bear hug and embraces this person and takes the full impact of that explosion and saving the lives of many other police officers right in that vicinity. And then there's another one at another police center there, where again the same type of situation took place, but in this case they were able to kill the would-be suicide bomber before he was able to set it off. So, but in doing so, one of the police officers died. So we had 3 different incidents that same afternoon as September 13th, where 3 police officers in 3 different police pillars each gave their lives in stopping suicide bombers from inflicting large casualties on innocent Afghan civilians. Those people were dedicated to doing their jobs and serving the people of Afghanistan. When I go out and see Army recruits, you know, for the first time what I'm hearing them tell me is there one element of national unity they're starting to feel like they have in their country is their Army. It's the most ethnically balanced force that exists today inside of Afghanistan. It's something very, very closely us and the Afghans monitor every single month within each of the ranks by each ethnicity, and we make sure organizations are built to be ethnically balanced. But I'm really finding that the people talk about that's a real source of national unity for them, is their Afghan National Army. And when that kind of thing starts occurring, when they're not talking about a region or a tribe or ethnicity, but rather about a national symbol, that really does start to give you a lot more hope about what the possibilities are. And again, it starts with leaders. And these, this last group of 299 young National Military Academy graduates that graduated at the end of March this year from their military academy, when you talk to those 300 young second lieutenants, they're all about serving Afghanistan. Again, this class that just came in, 600 young men out of 4,600 that were qualified, we made 100% ethnically balanced. Not only do we ethnically balance it, we run around the country and put pins with our Afghan counterparts in every single district in their country, so that there is a person from every place in that nation that's represented in this class of 600 that just entered their 4-year military academy. Again, working very diligently towards establishing a national unity force that the people are now starting to talk about. So I really believe there's that feeling of serving the people of Afghanistan is taking hold. It's not something we're in the lead for, but I find Afghans themselves starting to talk about, of which, though we do talk about your job is to serve and protect, to uphold the Constitution of Afghanistan, which most could not read 2 years ago, but about half this force now has the ability to start to comprehend and read basic parts of it. Values have now been instituted in the Army and the police. 2 years ago, none existed. Today, you can actually go in and talk to police and Army recruits. What's your value system? And there's a value system that's been established, the Afghans have approved and implemented, that is now being taught. It's even being taught in the literacy courses too, so that we teach them loyalty, duty, and God, and country, and those type of words that are, in their value system. So I see a real change from 2 years ago to today that really does make me very optimistic about what can be in the future. Okay.
Yeah. Really, the final two questions, very quickly. Please introduce yourselves. We'll go back there and then to Terry.
Christopher Zieler for the Stuttgarter Zeitung and the Tagesspiegel in Germany. You mentioned challenges and possibly some difficult times ahead too, although you're very optimistic. Can you tell us a bit what, especially in your mission, what critical phases or points in the near or midterm future you're looking at with expectation or with some, perhaps nervous or not? No. What are those critical points in the future you're looking at?
I'd say as I sit down with my Afghan counterparts and we constantly, what we call war game, try to think ahead and anticipate and prepare for things that might occur out there. I would say the biggest one is just the continuing need for the Army and the police to serve the people. If they maintain that ethos that's they're imbuing today into the police force and into the Army, it'll have a dramatic difference in how the people look at their police and Army, and in fact can have a real difference in how this whole insurgency takes hold or starts to dissipate inside of Afghanistan. You're never going to kill your way to victory. The kinetic operations that happen are not going to be the thing that's going to be the decisive factor inside of Afghanistan. It can set the conditions, but ultimately it's about a government, it's about a security force that serves and protects the people that's really going to be the determinant factor. The one face of the government that's out there every day is the police. So the more the police actually believe that they're there to serve and protect rather than to be served and to profit, it will really start to have a dramatic impact on how the people view the country of Afghanistan and their willingness to support and be a part of what this government is trying to do out there in that country. So those are the kind of things we really spend time talking about and how important it is. And again, it always ends up coming back to leader development, the importance of leaders, and how just critical it is that we continue to make that a #1 priority in everything we do with our Afghan counterparts, because leaders really do make a significant difference.
Final question to NPR.
Terry Schultz with National Public Radio and Global Post. Earlier this year, there was such fear and such an apparent increase in infiltration that you were training a team to specifically, of Afghans, obviously, to work specifically on being eyes, looking more carefully at their colleagues, their counterparts, and seeing if they were a risk for turning. And I'm wondering if you can just update us on how that's going, if seeming to pull people out that you would have had something to fear from, and also after the Rabbani assassination in particular, but also other high-level assassinations, has there been any change or any greater role for NATO in personal protection of high-level individuals? Thanks.
What I tell you is that there is a very, what we call, active and continuous ongoing process to assess those who are serving in the force, the police and the Army, to ensure that they are in fact serving the government of Afghanistan and have not been necessarily turned to do something differently. What we started about this time last year, the training of counterintelligence personnel. We've trained several hundred now, counterintelligence personnel that are today now serving both in the Army and in the police. What we started around May, June timeframe was also now starting to train Afghans to be the trainers of counterintelligence personnel, so the coalition wouldn't be doing that anymore, but rather the Afghans could take the lead. They have not yet taken full responsibility, but within about another 6 months, they'll be in the lead for doing that training themselves. We are going to still double the size of that current force that's out there in the police and the Army today in terms of putting even more counterintelligence personnel inside the police force. So there'll be hundreds inside the Army and hundreds inside the police force, to give everyone, more importantly than anything, the Afghans themselves, but then also the coalition partners working with them, the assurance that everything possible that could be done is being done to preclude the ability of somebody to turn somebody who's currently serving in the force to do harm to those who are assisting or helping, or even to other Afghans, which has occurred too. So there is an ongoing, very deliberate effort.
Are they pulling people out?
They are, and we obviously have a very detailed 8-step vetting process that we use as people come in. I say we and the Afghans collectively together, which now has the National Directorate of Security integrated into it also. So it's now a much more holistic Afghan look. It ties into an Afghan national biometric database, of which there's hundreds of thousands of data in there now of Afghans that we screen against on a monthly basis. I've never tried to put an exact number to it, but I know every month we do pick up people that are trying to come into the force. There's different categories. Some are categories that just say this person should not be allowed entry into the security services, so we turn them away. And there are people every month like that. There's others that are in a category that says, if you find this person, please detain them for further questioning by Afghan authorities. And we do pick up 1 or 2 or 3 every month, also like that. We currently are doing 100% biometric re-enrollment of the entire police force in the Army. And each month we pick up 1 or 2 also there that require further questioning and discussion with Afghan authorities. So it's a continuous, active, ongoing process. There's no end state to it. As we tell the Afghans, you want to continually do this all the time. You just constantly keep refreshing it. And then that gives you the greatest assurance that you're going to preclude this kind of insider threat from occurring inside your police or Army. As far as senior officials within the Afghan government, there is an ongoing effort being done bilaterally currently by the United States to assist the Afghan government in greater protection for senior Afghan officials. I realize I do look like an American officer, I'm a NATO officer, but I'm very much aware of and knowledgeable about this ongoing effort by the United States to assist. It's predominantly by giving them enabling them to do it themselves through monetary support and information and specialized kinds of instruction that they can enhance and further add to the amount of protection being given to senior Afghan officials without the United States personally being involved in it, or the vetting of it, or the certification of it. The Afghans would do all that, but they needed monetary support and some specialized instruction for their trainers, and those kind of things are happening, started in the last couple of weeks, beyond what was currently being done in the past, based on clearly what happened in Afghanistan.
Lieutenant John Caldwell, thank you very much for giving us such a thorough, detailed overview of the achievements of NTM-A over the last 2 years, and thank you very much for your very clear dedication and all your hard work. And thank you very much for being here.